for the record, let's start with the fact that Soup City Sins as a world is at its heart about choice and consequence. It's been said by one or a few people to be noirish in the fact that there really are no simple right answers to any of the questions that it poses. Now, we as a troupe began our play with a relatively large group of kindred who worked with or alongside the Harrisville shelter in Rogers Park, which is on the north side of Chicago. In fact, it's one of the further northernmost parts of Chicago. Many people who live in the area call it the North Pole. The Harrisville shelter was the face of the coteries to the world. It's their business front and in some cases feeding pool. Now, that's all fine and good, but the truth of the open secret of the matter is that they actually did some good from the shelter. The shelter was built into the first floor of an abandoned hospital, and with the remainder of the building being partitioned off and boarded up as the actual working group haven of the coterie, hence part of their name being called the shelter, colloquially with other kindred who know they even exist. Now, due to a constant allocation of funding and efforts, they're consistently and very much secretly upgrading the unliving spaces of the building. But, lest we forget, the coterie itself. Well, initially there was a Hackamite former assassin who'd hoped to outrun their past in New Orleans, who simply was called Joseph. There was a Ventru childer embraced illegally and hidden amongst the coterie. His name was Raoul LeBlanc. There was also a Church of Set ministry spy who hoped to usurp Marcel's control and bring true freedom to the Cameron of Chicago. His name was Cameron Orme. He was quite the character. He worked multiple angles at once and was effectively the mouthpiece or face man for the coterie. Also part of the initial coterie was a former cop who been embraced into the Tremere clan. He hoped to rise in power enough that he would be able to return the Tremere in general and the Chicago Chantry specifically to real city power. That was Julius Fairmont. And then, of course, there were a few others, namely a freshly dead Lasombra private investigator who had no actual ties to the Lasombra clan and was, in fact, searching for information to solve his most important case. Now, his most important case was actually being who killed him. His name was Lucio Darcy. There was a Toreador Sabat double agent who was hoping to bring the city to his knees. He'd come to the city with the mission of embedding himself enough to find all the true power structures and laying them low. That was Simone Sorochi. There was also, at the initial outset, and even still to this day, the heart and soul of the coterie, the coterie mom, as it were. There was a Tremere. She was a Tremere who survived by isolating herself from the Chantry and kindred society at large. She stayed as far away and far removed as feasibly possible to avoid all the struggles for power and the societal warfare and strife. This was Hester Green. Now, along their path from season 1 till today, which we're in season 5, which will be posted shortly, they brought into their ranks several other kindred. There was a supernatural debunking Malkavian who had strong ties to the informational reporting world here in Chicago and, of course, slightly abroad. That was Clyde Parolo. There was a Bruja road warrior who at her heart, I think it is yearning for freedom, and at the same time, the family that she lost along the way. Her family, her crew of other kindred that she battled the various ups and downturns of the road, and that's Dizzy. And lastly, but not leastly, there were two others. A Nosferatu technology maven, who actually came into the city on a personal mission of finding out what happened to a near and dear friend of his, Whispers. And another Hackamite, a Hackamite Buddhist, who believed that his mission was one of humanity, and it was better and more simplistically applied than being simple simply judge, jury, and executioner as he believed the other children of Hakim were. And this is Alexander Hunt. Now, at present, due to the ups and downs of the coteries' very wondrously eventful unlives, the shelter is currently Hester Green, Lucio Darcy, Clyde Parolo, Alexander Hunt, and Dizzy. This may or may not change, but as is always the case, we look forward to whatever their adventures may be. But getting to the now is the purpose of our little talk today. So, for the record, I am Mr. Nobody, the storyteller, and an open secret of mine, I am the biggest fan of the shelter and their adventures on Soup City since. So, to begin, in the purpose of our little talk today, the start of our journey was actually really quite simple. The first season of our chronicle was 10 episodes stretching from April 29th to July 1st of 2020. And the episodes were titled, in order, The Ladle, The Pain, Skillet Meat Pot, Laughing Inside, Truer Than Fact, Ignore and Survive, At What Cost, B-52 to the Radar, Fade to Black, and Epilogue to the Alpha. This was the first season of Soup City Sins. Okay, so with the episodes of the first season being as they were, it's just interesting to note that in the first season of Soup City, the coterie suffered their first loss and disappearance during its actual second episode, aptly titled The Pain. Joseph chose not to continue, not leaving, in fact, at the start of the episode. Now, during these initial burgeoning days, we as a troupe attempted to split our focus during live play sessions with actual text as well. And this practice fell by the wayside due to several reasons over the course of consecutive seasons, but as we found our footing, quite a bit of the action was split between the oral, play, and written. In fact, it was one of the many factors influencing the decision to not record our sessions for posterity. Now, during our third session, mid-episode, the player of one of our Tremere, Julius Fairmont, asked to record it, and of course we all agreed it would be fine, as it was predominantly only being recorded for his own recollections, not for posterity, as it were. All the same, our first season began with our characters being called together due to Hestia noticing a precipitous decline in those they helped. People were missing, and not the usual transient lifestyle missing. Belongings were left behind. Friends had no honest clue where they'd gone to. Their usual places of panhandling or busking were left empty, or at least occupied by others. It was quite troubling for Hestia to fathom the why of it all. Now, a fact we should probably address is each of the coterie members had at least one touchstone either working for the shelter or being served by it. Now, this fact, those affiliated with the shelter were going missing, lit a fire like very few things will for kindred. Now, over the next 9 episodes, the coterie found themselves in the midst of a citywide uptick in missing mortals, kindred, and various numerous political machinations of older, more experienced kindred, namely the Cold War between Urzuli and Brett Stryker. Now, these counter-strike engagements culminating in Stryker leveraging the coterie to deliver invitations to his Empyrean party. It was a party where the truth of kindred society was laid bare, or at least filmed, as far as everyone believes and knows. Now, he'd rented out the entirety of the W Hotel. He threw a bacchanalia that roamed and raised the entirety of the hotel from the ground floor all the way to the roof. The roof was laid out and bedecked in the most egregious violations of the masquerade. It was literally a once-in-a-lifetime sight, as it was as decadent as inhumanly possible. There were flesh-crafted sculptures of living works of art. There were human decanters who were being force-fed various substances and beverages so that the kindred partaking of them could sample such delicacies. There were all manner of completely debaucherous and very apparent supernatural activities taking place. Part of the ability for him to hold such a function was his promise, or the understood promise, of absolute security. To say that didn't work quite out. Stryker gave a speech, an actually rousing speech, where it was made evident he felt that he should be the chief harpy, i.e. the harpy of the city, if not primogen, and that the kindred gathered should band together to make it an actual fact. It was his appeal to the basest of base natures of kindred society to gain some momentary, immediate bump in status and power. Unfortunately for him, shortly after his speech, the party was beset by news choppers and copters taking in the full sights on display, from the human decanters to the flesh-sculpted art. All bits of it were within view of their cameras. Luckily for our coterie, they, however, had made their exit a few seconds before, as Simone noticed the choppers and copters closing in. In doing so, they did, however, bring their newly embraced La Sombra, Lucio Darcy, to the attention of Jason Newberry, who was already in the midst of being very, very hungry and needy. And one thing leading to another, the coterie fell into the elevator with Newberry, and in the ensuing melee, Newberry lost an eye, and the coterie had managed to subdue him as best as possible, or at least stop his immediate physical, visceral, animalistic attack. His attack, of course, was fostered by his own hunger and Hestia extinguishing his vitae, driving him even more into the full grips of his beast. Once the elevator reached the first floor, however, the coterie split up, Hestia and Cameron making their way towards the exit, Cameron working to subdue the crowd and their general terror and frenzy behavior of mortals, while Hestia made her way outside to find locomotion away from the scene. Now, that left Simone, Lucio, and Julius attempting to physically further subdue Newberry, all without killing him. They managed to not kill him. However, in the scuffle, Newberry ended up draining several passing mortals, mastering himself enough to launch a coordinated attack of dementation against the three kindred, who were hoping to keep him from further not only savaging the masquerade, but causing more undue damage. Unfortunately, the attack of Newberry's dementation left each of the three in the grips of their worst existential dread, as they came face to face with their worst ideas of continued unliving, their worst ideas of death, and it was a horrible situation for them to be in. All the same, they managed to escape. Newberry managed to escape. The coterie managing to escape in a limousine that was owned by Critias. It was a nice culmination of the season for the most part, but the season actually ended with the shelter coterie standing before the provincial council, the city government, including Prince Jackson. They were pleading their case for life. It was decided through very careful negotiations and calls for aid and lots of backroom political maneuvers by the coterie, their allies, their mala, to offer themselves in terms of service as hounds, provided they survive the education at the hands of Critias. And that's where we left season 1. Season 1 was kind of a, not to beat a dead horse or dead aphorism, kind of a roller coaster ride of ups, downs, and lots of secrets coming to the fore, lots of things being found out, and the coterie made themselves kind of a name for themselves. They were able to physically accost a member of the Primogen and get away with it relatively unscathed, as far as the word was spread. Gave it a few moments for that to soak in, and then we promptly started season 2. Now, season 2 for the Shelter Coterie was 9 episodes long, starting on July 28th and continued all the way until September 9th. Now, during the second season, we lost Julius and Raoul, but in the process, we gained Clyde and Alexander. Now, Clyde, having in-world and character met Hestia a few years earlier, but for the most part, outside of his therapy sessions with Newberry, remained clear of most of the Chicago Kindred's attention. Now, the episodes for season 2 were in order: war is what happens when the language fails. The more you sweat on pie, a false peace is nothing better than a war. In war, truth is the first casualty. And ended with a season epilogue titled Sleeping Fleas, Waking Dogs of War. Now, we picked up and we began season 2 with the bulk of the coterie in re-education classes with Curtius, where they watched as he cut a swath through the young, newly embraced kindred, both those that had been given the right to be created as well as those who had not and had lucked out and been given leniency, being forced into re-education classes. Now, in the course of their adventures during these classes, they met a new kindred named Portia, to whom they were drawn, even going so far as to spend the night on the town partying with her and getting to know her. Now, over the course of the season, they also dug further into the mystery surrounding the Shadow Kings of the city, which they found out during season 1 that they existed. They also found more information about the disappearing kindred and, most surprisingly, the unexplored, heretofore unknown maze that exists beneath the actual succubus. And the revelations of several truths did a lot to rock the coterie to their core, including the fact that there were not only hidden spaces of the city, but that the gargoyles actually existed in the lost underground spaces. Another fact that was a little startling was the fact that their haven is actually built atop a ley line nexus point. They found out about the Chicago outfit having designs in the city in general and their haven in particular, as well as they intended to work off both their debt to the Shadow Kings and surviving Cretius's classes, so they could live long enough to actually complete paying off their debt to the city by serving as hounds underneath the Sheriff Damien. Now, this season is also where we began recording our live play sessions. So, starting with episode 7, Is Nothing Better, the Shelter coterie's adventures have been saved for posterity. You can find them on YouTube by just searching up Super City Sins, or there are several links on our Discord server for you to view at leisure. Now, the second season itself actually ended with the Shelter attending a relatively once-in-a-lifetime Dalton disco night at the Queen of Spades. Now, the place erupted in a torrent of violence and death as it was beset by a multiplicity of gunmen, grenadiers, and frenzied vampires. Vampires, kindred, don't mix with fire very well. Now, one of the paths of escape turned out to be a stone stairwell which had become exposed during the explosions and fire and the burning debris. Many of the gathered kindred and patrons, human and all steps in between, tried to follow Clyde into this space to escape all of the maelstrom of violence and death that was taking place around them. Now, in the space beneath, the coterie itself found that the several things, namely an ancient, wounded, and dying lupine that they dispatched with all due haste and surprising skill. Now, in their doing so, they also managed to save some elders of the city, those elders being Newberry, Urzuli, Mama Wande, and Sophia Eyes. Now, in doing so, defeating the local homegrown terrorist anarchs and the like who had chosen to set the place ablaze and cause as much damage and destruction as possible, they managed to meet Alexander Hunt, who happened to be at the Dalton Disco as per his own reasons and machinations, and in doing so, they managed to escape with the lupine's body, just ahead of the sirens rushing into the area. Now, this is the unsaved posterity past of the shelter coterie of Soup City Sins. It is long and tangled, and there's some details, many details that I didn't mention at here, but they do come into play over the next few seasons. And as always, I want to thank you all for your time and your choose for even listening to this and even tuning in and listening to the episodes. And hopefully you like what comes ahead, because in season 5, it would not be an understatement to say that a significant number of things will change irrevocably for the coterie, and with any luck, it'll be good changes. But we have yet to see, and we'll see what works out. Thanks a lot. This has been Soup City Sins by I Am Your Storyteller, Mr. Nobody, and I look forward to knowing what you think. Thanks so much. Bye.